What's good, gamers? Akalon here, and of course, welcome back to each and every one of you. I promised you that I would do an analysis of A Whisper of Warning, a new short story in World of Warcraft, just before the War Within, really, and it is a good one. It is a very, very good short story. For the most part, it is a love story. It's a love story between Illyria and Turalyon, Turalyon and Arator, Illyria and Arator, their son, of course. But there is so much hidden in this story that you would miss. If you blinked, you'd miss it, and it would be gone. There's also a lot of people that were upset about the story that didn't, I think, read the story correctly. So I'm going to go through the main plot points of the story, the main subjects, the main ideas that's in the story, and hopefully we'll highlight some of the really cool things that did happen in this short story. Now, before we get into it, though, quick plug. Yes, I have to pay the bills. $1 a month keeps the channel free from sponsorships that want to sell you stuff that you do not need. Right now, there's a Q&A video over on Patreon for those of you that want to go check that out. So right off the bat, I think the story does a phenomenal job at setting up the unease. Now, when you read this, your immediate thought will be, well, sure, Silvermoon and Lorthamar and literally all of the residents of Silvermoon is very, very wary of Illyria. Don't forget, Illyria went to the Sunwell, and things did not go well. She almost destroyed it because of reasons. We'll get into that in a little bit. But there is definitely something with the Sunwell and the void within her that just reacted incredibly violently. But I read a little bit more into this. Now, there's been a massive discussion in the WoW community about the Horde and the Alliance, the war between the Horde and the Alliance. And for a long time, specifically in Dragonflight, it kind of looked as if that war is now finally at an end. Blizzard sort of made the different factions treat each other almost as friends, working together, the Forsaken coming to aid the Worgen in retaking Gilneas. It just seemed like the war was really at an end. And then, of course, we find out now in the lead up to the War Within, from Maria Hamilton specifically, but in other interviews as well, the war between the Horde and the Alliance is indeed not over. Anything but. It is a truce. It is probably a stronger truce than it's ever been, but the only real reason for that is the fact that both the Horde and the Alliance have been completely decimated. They don't have an army left that can really fight the war. And there is that cinematic, if you think back to Battle for Azeroth, where Anduin stands and looks out over Stormwind Harbor, and you see all of the bodies returning, and just the thousands upon thousands of soldiers that had already perished in this war with Sylvanas and the Horde. So clearly both sides do not have much left in the way of fighting. So this truce is more based on necessity rather than like an actual peace agreement or even allyship. And Maria Hamilton confirms that that war will absolutely be sort of highlighted again, will definitely come forth once again. And I think I know how this will start to happen, or at least what those what the battle lines will become. Now, the book does a phenomenal job of using Illyria as sort of the catalyst to showing the distrust and the unease that exists. As soon as Illyria arrives, she is met by Lorthamar. Lorthamar personally coming out, and that is because Illyria is there. They allow Illyria into the city, but under strict watch. She is being followed literally every step of the way. And the only reason they're doing this, I imagine, is out of respect for what she once was and what the Windrunners once were. So it is definitely somewhat to Illyria's point, but also then I think it does serve as a catalyst for something a little bit bigger. Now, the next point that I have here is actually going to be about Illyria specifically, because there's something that we need to talk about. Is Illyria Xal'atath? Now, there are some things about the pose that Illyria strikes within the cinematics that is very eerily similar to that of Xal'atath in her short little cameo in the cinematic. Xal'atath being an elf, and then Illyria seemingly on the way there is incredibly interesting. Now, let's talk about what is Xal'atath currently described as. She's described as the Harbinger. What is a Harbinger? It's one that prepares the path for something better. The Harbinger of Chaos, for example, the Harbinger of Death, the Harbinger of the Void. It's the one that prepares the way. Now, we need to go back to a little bit of a whisper. The whisper says at the hour of her third death, she will usher in our coming. That is legitimately what a Harbinger does. Absolutely what a Harbinger does. Now, in times past, we've looked at this whisper, and especially now with Xal'atath being described as the Harbinger, we've said, well, maybe it's Xal'atath's third death. The only problem is we know of potentially one death that Xal'atath has suffered. We could argue that there may have been a second with the release of Xal'atath from the dagger, although you'd have to really stretch some logic there. Illyria, on the other hand, have actively said that this feels like her second death, and she describes it in great detail. So a Harbinger does literally that at the hour of her third death. And if Illyria is to be correct, it would suggest that at the hour of her third death, she ushers in their coming. Now, Illyria does a number of things that you see in the book, and there's a lot of attention drawn to this. She is isolating herself to the point where now she struggles to even face them. There's one scene in the book where she's standing outside the house and she hears Turalyon and Arator inside, and she actually eavesdrop, and she's fighting this war in herself because she knows she shouldn't eavesdrop because she's afraid she might hear something inside that she doesn't like, which suggests to us at least that Illyria herself realizes she's very close to the edge. One wrong move, one moment of weakness, and she could fall to the void. So what would that look like? Well, in the hour of her third death, what did Deathwing do? Nalfarian. Sorry, at the time he was Nalfarian. When Nalfarian was at the point of destruction, after the glove was destroyed, and he had lost control of his army, effectively, that was the moment that he invoked the void for the first time, and that was the spiral that would ultimately make him into just, you know, the terrible monster that he would become. So death is definitely, or impending doom is definitely a compelling reason to turn to the void. Now, what's very interesting is that Illyria herself does not want to part with the void. There's one part in the book where it says, Illyria knew that if Turalyon could hear the voices that clawed at her psyche, he would either push her away forever or spend the rest of his life trying to fix her. Possibilities that were equally repugnant. That is interesting. Losing her husband, losing the love of her life, and you can tell she truly loves him, or losing her powers, are both repugnant to her in equal measure, suggesting that Illyria is probably much further away than what she's ever been. The void is definitely starting to make headway. It is starting to prepare her slowly but surely. Then, of course, we know that Khadgar is the one that summoned her to Dalaran in order to look for an object called the Dark Heart. And specifically, this object is carried by the Harbinger. Now, we believe that the Harbinger is Xal'atath. But is it possible that the Harbinger is in fact Illyria? Or is it even more possible that Illyria is Xal'atath? We know that it is custom in World of Warcraft, when one makes a switch from one to the other, names can oftentimes change. Dragons, for example, will change the way their names are pronounced from, you know, mortal form into human form. In the light, people oftentimes choose different names in order to go with their newfound persona. So name changes aren't necessarily impossible. And specifically for creatures of the void, you can imagine different names being chosen. The Infinite Dragonflight, for example, all have new names to go along with their infinite personas now. So how would that work? Well, if Illyria is to be Xal'atath, if that is possible, we need to ask ourselves a fundamental question, and that is time. How did time play into this? Because obviously we know that Illyria has been around for as long as, well, basically Azeroth has been around, or at least as long as mortal races have been around. And we know that Xal'atath has been around far longer than that, because Xal'atath dates back to much, much older than any of the known races of Azeroth, or at least the current known races of Azeroth. So clearly Xal'atath predates Illyria by probably several thousands of years, if not more. Millions, perhaps. But this is where time comes in. Remember, the Void isn't bound to time. They're also not bound to a singular timeline. It is entirely possible that Illyria is the one that was killed in Orgrimmar. Remember, there's this whisper, they will pay for what was done to me so long ago. But what if what Xal'atath was talking about there is a moment that is actually happening in the future? But to her, this is a moment that was done very long ago. Because the Void moved in the future in a different timeline. Illyria was killed in Orgrimmar, placed inside a dagger to become a weapon, her name becoming Xal'atath, and the Void yanked that dagger back to our timeline, and that's where Xal'atath was born, the harbinger of the Void. Now, you might be saying to yourself, Acklon, that sounds deep and also a little bit of a stretch, and I agree with you. I'm just trying to make sense of this whole thing. Now, there's a couple of whispers that's very interesting that the Void throws out here, and it sort of strengthens, in some ways, strengthens this argument. One of them is, now, return to the Sunwell and finish our communion. You owe Lorthamar nothing. Claim what is yours. Destroy him and take this place. Claim what is yours. Finish our communion. In other words, the moment that she was at the Sunwell. Now listen to what she describes she felt when she was at the Sunwell. She had felt the power flow into her, filling her with light. And then it was as if she herself had become a portal, and creatures of the Void spilled out like pus from a wound, filled with light. That is what she felt. It was a warm feeling at first, and then the Void bursted out of her, like came bursting out of her, which is, in my opinion, a very, very, very interesting sort of mix of emotions there. How easily they turn on you, like your true love has turned on you. You repulse Turalyon. Your son fears you too. Unleash what repels them. Destroy them. Destroy all the unworthy insects here. Seize your power. This is a thing that's literally happened since the first. The Void continuously pushes Illyria to seize her power, to find that power within herself. And what if that is exactly what happened in a different timeline? Illyria did eventually seize that power. Illyria gave in. At the hour of her third death, she gave in to the Void. She became Xal'atath, and then she led the armies of the Void to the very steps of Orgrimmar, and that's where she was defeated and then placed inside this blade, this prison blade. I have oftentimes mentioned that the blade holds a lot of similarities to Titan weapons, and very specifically, Titan weapons can absolutely become prisons. It's what the Titans build. They build prisons. In fact, it looks very similar to Sargeras' weapons. Sargeras made weapons that look very much like the Xal'atath blade. So I would not be surprised if we find an uncorrupted version of this blade somewhere, and that blade then becomes the very thing that houses Illyria's soul, because they figure out that she can actually not be killed, not in her Void form, because it would unleash absolute destruction. And so they place her inside that blade, and that would then bring about the whisper, they will pay for what was done to me so very long ago, the moment she enters into Orgrimmar. See how I did that? You are a monster. This boy can never understand you, cannot see you for what you are. Just give in. The Void knows you. The Void welcomes you. Give in. become what you truly are. It will never happen. You are changed. You are different. They will never understand you. They do not want to understand you. You do not need them. They do not want you. You must. And then she cuts them off. And I feel like the cut off there, because she tells the void to be quiet, and the void actually goes quiet. The void actually listens to her, which is very awkward and very strange. She actually sort of poses that maybe the void understood that on this matter, she could not be moved. And that, I think, the juxtaposition of that is what makes that line so super important. The void is telling her the truth. Remember, the void operates in half-truths. That does not mean lies. I've made an entire video on this. We completely misunderstand what the void says. It doesn't lie. It only tells you half the truth. That's what a half-truth is. It's not telling you the full truth. It's only giving you half-truths. And I said, what if we completely misunderstood the void? In other words, they never lie. It's not a half-truth like we would accept it to be, where I only tell you half the truth so I don't get into as much trouble. It's more just the void tells you enough to make you wonder, but not enough for you to figure it out. Because if you figure it out, you can actively guard against it. But if I only give you enough, just enough to go down the rabbit hole, I have you. Because you are going to follow that thread. Because I'm not actively telling you exactly what will happen to you. So, for example, if the void were to openly and actively tell Illyria, if she continues to use this power, she will absolutely become Xal'atath, the harbinger of the void. Xal'atath is her. Illyria would probably immediately expel the void, realizing that she is on a path of destruction that she cannot come back from. But that's not what they do. They keep telling her, they keep tempting her with power, the search and the need for power. That's the thing that's important here. And again, it's about not understanding. It's about them not understanding what she will become, and that she must accept the fact that this is already over. There is nothing else that she can do. That brings to an end the Illyria chapter. There's one more thing that I really wanted to point out, at least in all of this, and that is that she actively stays away from Stormwind, which I find very, very interesting, and specifically because of Turalyon. Now, Turalyon in this book doesn't feature as much, but there are a couple of things about Turalyon that did stand out. For example, Turalyon has two roles currently that he serves at the same time. The one is the Regent Lord of Stormwind, of the Alliance. The other is the High Exarch of the Army of Light. And that is a duty that he still actively pursues, and fulfills. He is still the High Exarch of the Army of Light. And Illyria actually explains that Turalyon is becoming more hardened in that approach. So Turalyon is sort of going the opposite direction to her. As time has gone on, and as she has become more familiar with her void powers, Turalyon has actually played far more into the light, and he's become far more rigid in his approaches to the light. And you can already see how things may start to set up within the next expansion, and how that war between the Horde and the Alliance may actually ultimately ignite. If the light shows up in absolute devastation and in incredible fashion, and I do believe that crystal that we see in the new expansion that changes color, I think that is a portal. I think it's a portal for the Army of the Light. And I do think we're going to see the Army of the Light showing up, especially with the Arathians now also being there, and they are very much a kingdom of light. I think we're going to see the void powers and the light powers both rise up, one out of the void, one out of the Horde, one out of the Alliance, and it's probably going to come to a head as a battle between the light and the void, maybe a four-way battle even, between maybe not everyone in the Alliance and not everyone in the Horde is on board with this light void stuff. We'll have to see how it all plays out, but I did want to throw that in because I think it's the only real interesting thing between Turalyon and, or from Turalyon within this book, but still, I think, interestingly enough. And one of the things that stood out to me is that Illyria actively avoids Stormwind. Remember, after the fall of Lordaeron, Stormwind became the capital of the light. The Church of Light is there. Basically, all of the priests, all of the paladins, Stormwind, their king, is a priest himself, and now their High Exarch, or their Regent Lord, is a paladin himself. So the city is filled with light. The fact that she is actively staying away from that city, I believe, again, to be twofold. One, to stay away from Turalyon because she feels a lot of judgment and a lot of pain when she sees him. But more importantly, Stormwind is no longer a place where she feels comfortable. The light is actively repelling her. The void within her is actively fighting this idea and this consequence of her becoming more and more, sort of entrenched within the void warfare. Then there's another very interesting concept within the book, and that is the foreshadowing of the reconstruction and of the attack of Silvermoon City. Now, I could be reading too much into this. We've had many discussions before. It's been a very openly sort of speculated thing in the community. People really want to see Silvermoon City rebuilt. It is a lot of people's favorite city. It is one of the most beautiful cities in World of Warcraft, and it's always been very crap that you can't actually go there. You need portals, and it's just a nightmare to really move through Silvermoon, and you can also not fly in Silvermoon City. The book actively talks about how they're in the process of reconstructing a Silvermoon City, but then it chooses a very interesting little place, or a very interesting little segue, I would argue, into what may come of Silvermoon. It mentions consistently this Scourge and how the Scourge destroyed massive parts of Silvermoon. Arator stopped in front of a crumbling house and turned to her. This place had long ago fallen to the Scourge and was just now being rebuilt. So talking about they're in the process of rebuilding it. But then Illyria said something that made me go, woo, wait, what? That could actually be really cool. Some in Silvermoon still lived such a life, believing their walls were enough to keep their city safe. They were wrong, of course. Such a needless line, unless, of course, the battle on Quel'Thalas starts at Silvermoon. And then, I believe, we get to what is probably the most interesting thing in this book, or in this short story, and probably also something that I've only seen a couple of people talk about. The Child of Light and Shadow. The prophecy of the light suggests that there will be a child of light and shadow that will win them the war. This child will bring order and balance to the universe. This child by the light is believed to be Illidan, and for good reason. The light views the foul as the child between light and void. The Titans write this. The foul, the twisty nether, was created where clashes between the light and the void was fiercest. Illidan, being a child of light and shadow, being of the foul, would make him a child of light and shadow. It is a very good read on that story. But I think it's wrong because I think it's too literal. I think we've all been thinking about it way too literally. The Child of Light and Shadow, the reason I have always rejected Arator as a potential Child of Light and Shadow is because at the moment of his conception, Illyria was not of the Void. Turalyon was a paladin, but Illyria was not of the Void. Illyria was just a Ranger General. But I think if we really start to imagine how this universe operates, a lot of things are a lot more symbolic than what they need to be precise. Arator, in this very moment in time, truly is the son of light and void, the son of light and shadow. He can be nothing other than that. His father is the High Exarch of the army of the light. His father's eyes glow golden as a result of the light. His mother, on the other hand, is actively dabbling and becoming stronger in the void. And there's a chance, based on what I've discussed earlier, that his mother is actually the harbinger of the void, that she is actively Xal'atath. And that would then, at the time of his conception, make him a child of light and shadow, because even though at the time Illyria was not yet part of the void, Illyria in a different timeline, in our timeline now as Xal'atath, was already succumbing to the void. So Arator would 100% be a child made from light and shadow. There's another interesting thing that I wanted to point out here. Now, I'm not entirely sure where this fits in, but it could. There's one whisper that have basically blown all of us away for a very long time, and it is the one, the vassal of life disguises treachery. Beware the eyes of green. Arator was born with green eyes. His eyes had changed to gold. And I just found it incredibly interesting that this would be included in the short story. Now, the vassal of life part is what's confusing, because we don't know him to be a vassal of life. We don't know him to be a servant of life. He is a paladin. He's basically part of the army of the light at this point, you know, following in his father's footsteps and all that. And yet, it could be possible. It would all depend on what Arator does next. It would all depend on where Arator finds himself in the coming battles. Could it be that Arator joins the side of the life and therefore becomes the vassal of life? And that's the thing that we should be scared of. I'm not entirely sure. I'm not saying that it is that, but I wanted to point that out because in the book, it's made a point that he was born with green eyes, but at some point it changed to gold. And this is where we get to another really big thing, and that is golden eyes. As far as we know, there were, prior to this, only 2 other known elves in history that was born with golden eyes. Now, in elven society, golden eyes signify greatness, power, and destiny. It's someone that has a destiny is born with golden eyes. The 2 that we know of that had golden eyes were Ajara and Illidan. And I believe there may have been a third, but I can't remember now. So you can let me know in the comment section down below. Only 2 that had golden eyes. Also happened to be very proficient in arcane magic. And now we have Arator. Also golden eyes. Very interesting. What that destiny would mean, we don't yet know, but thus far, everyone with golden eyes do have a crazy destiny. Okay? Now, we have a whisper here. Oh, first we have something that Illyria says to him. Now, Arator shows her his tattoos, right? He's got tatted up. Well, he didn't show her, but he removed his jacket, and then you saw... He rolled up his sleeve, sorry, and then you saw these tattoos. Dragon tattoos, specifically. One dark, one light. That is prophetic, quite frankly. Illyria finds it actually kind of cool. She likes the fact that he has this sort of rebellious side to him, but she does tell him that his father would not approve of it. His father would not be very happy with him getting tattoos, which again is a lovely bit of tradition, you know, sort of staunchness, stoicness, versus her being a little bit more of a rebel. All the Windrunner sisters, by the way, because every single one of them fell in love not with elves, but with humans or human-looking creatures. Well, actually, no, I think, yeah, all 3 of them fell in love with humans. So, yeah, I'm right. Yeah, never mind me. Sorry, this video has been long. It's already half an hour. But yeah, so it is, I think, a very interesting concept and a very interesting sort of, you know, juxtaposition again. And it is Illyria that then says to him, everything is connected, like the light with the dark in perfect balance. She regarded the 2 serpentine dragons flowing up each of his arms. Everything is connected. The child of light and shadow will bring balance. Everything is connected. Light and shadow in perfect balance with one another. And then we have the void again that says he will fight and fail. Turn him to our cause. As far as I know, this is the first time we've had a whisper from the void that doesn't just ask her to kill people, but actually wants him to be turned. They want him to their side. The light wanted Illidan because they believed he was the child of light and shadow. So it's interesting that this is the moment the Whispers want Arator for themselves. I do not, and I am sorry you cannot see it. And that is our common ground. Stubbornness. Neither of us has the option to reject our calling, no matter the cost. That line right there suggests to me more strongly than anything else, but when you put it with everything else, that Arator is going to play a massive role in the coming expansions. He has a duty, and he is going to follow his duty. Illyria is desperately trying to keep him out of the battle. She is desperately trying to convince him that he does not need to join, he does not need to fight, he needs to chill out, because she knows that something's coming. She knows that something may happen to him, and she doesn't want this to happen. The foreshadowing is insane, and Arator, being the staunch man that he is, trying to live up to the image of his own father, gets angry at her that she would ask of him to stay out of the fight, because he cannot stay out of the fight. He has a duty to be in the fight. He has destiny. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, that is everything. Oh, one final little thing that I thought was just really cool. They canonized the bags, our enchanted bags. Yeah, Illyria has one of those. It's enchanted. It can hold a lot of things, all of her armor basically inside of it, because it is just a bag, but it's enchanted, so it's actually bigger on the inside. I thought that was cool. A nice little bit of canonical confirmation of gameplay elements, so really cool and well done. Ladies and gentlemen, if you like, if you dislike, dislike. $1 a month gets you access to Patreon, where you get maybe a Q&A every once in a while, but you help keep the channel free from sponsorships that want to sell you shit that you do not need. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, be kind to each other, be good to each other, and I will see all of you in the next one. Peace.